So, what actually happens when our technological capabilities suddenly cross the line from a cool innovation to a serious government security threat? Well, this week, the frontier of AI violently collided with state power, and the fallout from that crash is quite literally rewriting the rules of the global economy.
Welcome to today's Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to be your guide through all this madness. Today we're breaking down a monumental week in the tech world. We're going to look at how these massive, sudden leaps in artificial intelligence have triggered some truly unprecedented government interventions, and how those exact same technological leaps are sending real-world economic shockwaves through global markets and our local job sector.
Here is our roadmap for today. First, the next generation arrives. Second, Washington hits the brakes. Third, the open source alternative. Fourth, disrupting the global economy. And finally, AI and the job market. Let's get right into it.
Part 1. The next generation arrives.
2 million. That is the staggering token context window rolling out with Google's Gemini 3.5 Pro right now. Just think about that for a second. You can basically feed this model thousands of pages of documents or massive, complex enterprise code bases all in a single prompt. When AI can process this much information at once, it completely stops being a simple chatbot, right? It becomes a comprehensive workflow engine, and that immense analytical power, the sheer ability to ingest and analyze vast amounts of sensitive data instantly, is exactly what just made regulators sit up and pay attention.
Which brings us to Part 2. Washington hits the brakes.
Because when you have that kind of sudden capability, federal regulators get very, very nervous. We just witnessed an absolutely wild 19-day saga this month. On June 9th, Anthropic launched its highly anticipated Fable 5. But then, just 3 days later, the U.S. Department of Commerce slammed on the brakes. They issued an emergency export ban, literally ordering Anthropic to suspend access for any foreign national anywhere in the world. The trigger for this? Amazon researchers had actually found a jailbreak, a clever prompt designed to trick the AI into bypassing its own safety rules so it could identify software vulnerabilities. It took until June 30th for a new safety framework to get ironed out, finally allowing for global redeployment on July 1st.
Now, to actually get their model back online, Anthropic had to agree to a strict 4-part framework. First up, pre-release access for the government to test any future frontier models. Second, rapid threat notification whenever significant jailbreaks are discovered. Third, advanced sharing of new safeguards. And fourth, they have to co-develop a joint jailbreak risk scoring framework with Amazon, Microsoft, and Google. Honestly, this fundamentally changes the game. It marks a massive shift from viewing the government as just a slow-moving regulator to actively integrating AI into the U.S. security infrastructure.
And you know, Anthropic isn't the only one feeling this pressure. OpenAI is quietly going down the exact same path. They're voluntarily throttling the preview of their GPT 5.6 models, so that's Sol, Terra, and Luna, limiting them strictly to a small group of trusted partners that have already been cleared by the government. Now, OpenAI publicly stated they don't believe this should become the long-term default, but the reality is they're complying with government requests to coordinate before any broad public release. Government clearance is rapidly moving from a polite courtesy to a de facto requirement for deploying frontier AI.
All right, let's look at Part 3, the open source alternative.
Because while Washington is busy creating all these bottlenecks, global innovation absolutely does not stand still. The release of Meta's Llama 4 has completely shifted the industry's default assumption about what open source AI can achieve. Llama 4 just landed as the most capable open source AI ever released, actually beating out closed models in some benchmarks. This democratization of power is entirely changing the math for developers. Before this, the conversation was basically, which commercial provider do we buy from? But now, teams are routinely asking if they should just run their own model, giving them incredibly powerful AI that they can control completely outside of these closed, government-regulated ecosystems.
And here is where you really see the strategic cost of these government-imposed delays. While U.S. models face all this deployment friction, alternatives like Zipoo AI's GLM 5.2 are rapidly gaining ground. It essentially matches the performance of Claude Opus 4.7, but get this, at just 1/5 the cost. This isn't just a neat little novelty. We're seeing startups completely abandon Western frontier APIs for cheaper, open models just to survive commercially. Basically, every week a U.S. model gets restricted, market share is essentially being handed over to unrestricted global competitors.
So, how does this hit the wallet? Let's move to Part 4, disrupting the global economy.
We are literally watching a tale of two tech sectors unfold right now.
On one hand, you have exploding venture capital wealth. Menlo Ventures just raised a record $3 billion, largely thanks to their early bet on Anthropic, which is now sitting at roughly a $14 billion valuation. But on the flip side, 142,000 tech sector layoffs year-to-date here in 2026. Companies are simply taking their traditional headcount budgets and redirecting them straight into AI infrastructure. The wealth generation we're seeing is astronomical for sure, but it's deeply concentrated, and it's happening at the direct expense of traditional tech labor.
And man, the scale of this disruption goes way beyond Silicon Valley. Think about India's $300 billion IT outsourcing industry. This whole sector has thrived for decades on having a massive pool of low-cost engineers. But it's heavily labor-intensive, and these fast-advancing AI tools pose an absolute existential threat to that model. Back in February of 2026 alone, fears over AI automation sparked a savage sell-off, wiping out roughly 2.5 lakh crore, which is about $30 billion from the index market value in just 3 days. Investors are waking up to the fact that AI tools can now do the heavy lifting that previously required thousands of human hours.
Which naturally leads us to part 5, AI and the job market.
Let's bring it back to the US for a second and look at how this hits everyday workers. The consensus estimate for June 2026 was that the U.S. economy would add about 185,000 jobs. But the actual number? A shocking 57,000. That is a massive miss. In fact, it makes it the lowest monthly payroll addition we've seen since the 2024 slowdown. The labor market is softening rapidly, and you can draw a direct line from that data straight back to the technology we're discussing today.
We've hit a record high of 88,000 direct U.S. job cuts specifically attributed to AI so far in 2026. This isn't some distant future threat anymore. It is currently replacing entry-level knowledge work. Think coding assistants, customer support, administrative roles, and it's doing it at an accelerating pace. And honestly, this creates a massive, somewhat ironic policy paradox for Washington. The exact same AI ecosystem that the government is rushing to protect for national security reasons is simultaneously crushing the entry-level job market that they rely on to maintain a strong economy.
So, looking at all these export bans, the mandatory safety pacts, and the very real economic displacement, we're left with a massive question. Are we entering an era where AI is governed strictly as a weapon of state power, or will the open source movement force it to remain a universally accessible public utility? The events of this week show us that the tug of war has officially begun, and whoever wins this battle is going to define our entire next decade. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I'll catch you next time.